Friday. I had never been to Bar Harbor before, although I spent some time in other places in the state as a child. Maine was a favorite beach destination for us growing up in the Boston suburbs. However, since I moved to New York for school, I had not returned there, and Maine was nothing like the small seaside towns I knew. Downtown was a bustling tourist destination masquerading as a charming New England town, lots of blue-gray facades, whales, and nautical motifs, but it all looked too cute and bustling, with lots of high-end restaurants, gift shops, boutiques, and other shops catering to people with money, which I actually didn't have. I was 25, and although I wasn't poor, I wasn't far from it. In general, I had a full-time teaching job and additional income from portrait photography. Since breaking up with Amy a few months ago, I've been ordering less takeout and saving more after all the student loan debt, rent, food, and bills were paid. But I definitely wouldn't be here if I paid for the trip myself. Amy, breaking up was the right decision, although it took me a while to accept that we weren't right for each other in a long time. I have already come to terms with this. But over the past month, abstinence has hit me in a different way. Regular access to good sex for 6 years has been difficult to give up. At the same time, I've never seriously dated anyone as an adult. Hell, I've hardly ever dated at all, and my first attempts over the last couple of months have been unsuccessful. The whole thing left me pretty damn disappointed in every sense of the word. Maybe this trip will help me unwind. I came for a 5-day photography workshop in the vicinity of Acadia National Park. This trip was my birthday gift from my parents, who not so subtly added an optional visit to them after completing this leg of the trip. After my sister and I left for college, they started coming here regularly. They had money. My father, a lawyer, was also an avid photography enthusiast and became acquainted with a group that ran photography tours in the area. I've done a bit of landscape photography, but never had the time or equipment to do it properly. Now, armed with a borrowed ultra-wide-angle lens to complement my own kit, I set out on a 5-day experiment. After enjoying the walk around the city center, I returned to the hotel. After quickly rinsing off, I glanced in the mirror. A 6-foot guy with thick dark brown, almost black hair. I've always been skinny, but over the past few months since my breakup, resuming my workouts has given me more definition. I look damn good without a shirt. I also look damn good with the close-cropped beard that was a recent addition. I was, as my mother's phrase sounded in my head, a real find. For a group dinner, I put on jeans and a nice polo and headed to the bar and grill across the street. I realized when I went there that I hadn't thought much about who else might be on this tour. I was a functional introvert. I could handle crowds, parties, and small talk, but I didn't usually crave them. In this situation, I will have to accept it, I told myself as I entered the restaurant. I'm a little late. There was a bar to the right and a seating area to the left with a poster on an easel announcing our tour dinner. My eyes moved over it and settled on a long table where about 8 people were sitting, all of them at least twice my age. Of course, it was logical. This tour was intended for retirees, not 20-year-olds. However, I felt a little uneasy, not sure how well I would fit in with this company. I had no problem being alone, so I didn't worry too much. I took my name badge and met the tour leader, a local photographer named Kelly, who was in her mid-50s and had the slightly leathery appearance of someone who spends most days in the sun. She was friendly, and we talked for a while I signed my badge. Erin, New York. I walked over and found a chair at the table. There were 12 seats at the table, and with 8 already taken, I was one of the last to arrive. I wondered if we were expecting someone else. I had barely gotten my glass of beer when the answer came. 2 women burst into the restaurant, and the older one apologized to Kelly for being late, while the younger one looked around. She was stunningly beautiful, with large brown eyes and sharp features. Brown hair hung down along her long neck below her shoulders. She looked to be in her early 20s, with a light but athletic build, which her bright blue dress emphasized very impressively, although not openly. She fiddled with her badge, which gave me time to admire her gorgeous ass. I couldn't read her name from across the room and stared too long. She caught my gaze and smiled slightly, but with a sparkle in her eyes, something more behind it. I smiled awkwardly in response and returned to the table, where one of my interlocutors, Hank, as I later learned, was finishing a loud story that caused light laughter. Latecomers took the last seats at the far end of the table. After we made the order, it was time for introductions. Our names, place of residence, what kind of photography we do or are interested in. I'm Aaron, a high school teacher in Utica, New York. I'm into portrait photography, but I want to expand my horizons. I began. We walked in circles. Sue and Gary from New Hampshire seemed nice enough, if not boring, in a typically suburban New Hampshire way. Predictably, they were passionate about ornithology. Lisa, from Vermont, was about 60, artistic, thin and outgoing, and loved landscape photography, even selling her work. Hank was a retired Boston engineer and general hobbyist. Tim and Craig, a Portland couple, were semi-professionals selling photographs online and at local art shows. Ken and Yvette, an Asian couple from Connecticut, were also semi-professionals. The two women at the other end of the table looked at each other, and the younger one spoke first. I'm Jessica, and this is my mom, Pam. We are from Central Mass, near Worcester. We are both new to photography and are trying to learn it together. Kelly welcomed everyone and reminded them that this tour is for photographers of all levels. Dinner was served, and we began to eat, chatting at the table about our professions, places of residence, and so on. I didn't really follow the conversation at the other end of the table. Hank was a loud and frequent talker. The tour participants closest to me mostly discussed families, children, and grandchildren among themselves. I just listened without saying too much. After I finished my food, Lisa turned to me and asked about teaching. I shared a little. I just finished my third year as a high school history teacher, which brought me a decent pay raise and some job stability. And the old head of the photography club recently retired, so I'll be taking over next year. That's one of the reasons I decided to come here, to get more experience in landscape photography. Well, I will. I'm glad to be your listener, she said, finishing her glass of wine. So, her tone changed a little. Do you have a girlfriend? Out of habit, I almost answered yes, but then froze. She misinterpreted it. Oh, sorry, maybe a guy. Of course, I'm minding my own business, but, well, I'm old, I've had a couple of glasses of wine, and manners are stupid. We both laughed. No, sorry, I hesitated because I recently broke up with someone, my ex-girlfriend, about 4 months ago. And this started the telling of a history that actually did not exist. Amy and I met in college my sophomore year, her first. We quickly got along and stayed together until graduation. I was in a 5-year dual teaching degree program, so we graduated in the same year. We rented an apartment together in Utica, and it went on like that for a couple of years until one day it all ended. She said these words, but we both felt distance. We parted on good terms. Sometimes we talked, but not often. We were just different people. When I told this story, Lisa nodded as if this was not a particularly unique experience. She started telling a story about her college boyfriend. As she spoke, I caught Jessica's gaze again. This time she was looking at me. After dinner, Kelly announced that she would stay at the bar a little longer and invited us to join. Hank agreed loudly, and Ken and Yvette excused themselves and headed back to the hotel. Lisa, Gary, and Sue were deep in conversation about bird feeders when I stood up and walked over to the bar, only to realize that Jessica and her mom were no longer in sight. Assuming they had already left, I ordered another beer and checked my phone. Nothing but a text from my mom asking how I got there. I quickly responded as soon as my beer arrived. I had just put down my credit card when a voice came from behind my shoulder. You and I seem to be the only ones bringing the average age of the group below 55. I turned around and saw her smiling that smile again. I'm Jessica. I shook her hand. Aaron. And yes, it looks like we're sneaking into an old people's party. At least you brought yours. She laughed, and I realized that I liked this feeling. Yes, my mom, we talked for a long time about going on a trip together, and everything came together for this. We exchanged important information, studies, work. She graduated from college last year, near Worcester, majoring in psychology and considering medical school. She lived with her mother and worked as an administrative assistant at a local hospital while she decided where she would go next. "So what made you choose this?" I asked when my beer arrived. "And," he pointed to the bar, "do you want anything at my expense?" "Be brave, young man." She smiled and straightened her hair behind her ear. "Thank you, I'll drink the same as you." I turned to the bartender, who nodded and poured another glass. Jessica took a sip. "So, the reason we came was because of our interest in photography, which is something we both really want to do. But actually, she and my dad had just broken up, and it was hard for her, so it seemed like a good way to take her mind off of it." As if on cue, Pam, who had been chatting with Hank at the bar, came up to us. We exchanged greetings, and she turned to Jessica. "It's been a long day. I'm going to go to bed. Will you come with me or stay?" Jessica gave me an almost apologetic look. "You take your things, and I'll join you." Pam went to the table to get her bag and sweater, and Jessica looked at me again. "Sorry to run away. I'm really trying to spend as much time with her as possible on this trip." "It's okay. That's nice of you. See you on the road tomorrow," I answered. "I can't wait. Here, finish your beer, you paid for it." She put the glass in front of me and left. Such is my luck, I thought, finishing my beer and taking hold of hers, barely touched. Saturday. The first full day was a whirlwind. We started with a drive along Ocean Drive, a scenic road around the national park. It was wonderful, with new rocky cliffs and dramatic views appearing around every corner it seemed, and with the sun still low in the morning sky, the light was soft, red, and perfect. Our guide, Kelly, seemed to know this road by heart. She spent most of her filming time with the new girls, Jessica and Pam. They didn't have a tripod like most of us, so they made camera settings manually. I struggled with the wide-angle lens at first, but Lisa gave me some tips on geometry and other aspects, and I got the hang of it. Jordan Pond was similar. Jessica and I walked together for a while, talking about our college days and a few familiar places in Massachusetts. She was indeed a runner in high school and college, and she continued to do so. I talked about my failed attempts at running and my return to training. We talked about my little sister, who was also a runner, and her family. She was the youngest of 3 children and the only one who remained living nearby. Her older sister, 30, lived in Virginia with her family, and her 27-year-old brother lived in New York. The conversation was easy, and we shared a common sense of humor, which only added to her attraction to me. I got the impression that it was for her too. While we talked, Pam walked a few steps ahead, silent. Once we got there, I started setting up my tripod, eager to play with the wide-angle lens. Jessica asked about it, and I set up the camera so she could watch. She tried to turn it, but I had already tightened my head, so I went over and loosened it. My hand touched hers, and she smiled at me. "Sorry, I'm interfering with your equipment." She said the word with a slight accent, and my eyes widened a little when she gave me that smile again. Is she flirting with me? I haven't been flirted with in a long time. If it was flirting, it was nice. "You need to be more gentle with your head." She laughed again. Feeling a little bolder, I placed my hand on her lower back as I panned the camera around her. Suddenly, she glanced towards Pam, who was walking along the beach, and looked at me with a slightly embarrassed expression, as if she had remembered something important. "Sorry, I need to go for a walk with my mom. I really try to spend time with her. But thank you," she looked into my eyes, "for the lesson." Internally, I was disappointed and wondered if I had imagined the whole flirtation. I was clearly not keeping up with understanding the signals, so it was possible. I muttered, "You're welcome," and watched as she walked over to Pam. Craig and Tim settled down a few meters away, and I decided to join them. They were both frequent visitors to Acadia, as I learned on the bus ride. They gave me a couple of lens filters to try that allowed me to take long daylight exposures. I had never done this kind of work before, so it was a revelation to me. However, I found myself looking too often in the direction of Jessica and Pam, who were taking close-up shots of the rocks along the shore. "She's cute." Craig remarked after the fifth or sixth glance. What? I tried to pretend that I didn't understand, but Craig was not stupid, so I laughed a little. Yes, you caught me. She's cute. So what are you doing here with two old men instead of running after her? I told them Pam's story. Tim mostly looked confused as he adjusted the shot, and Craig shrugged. Sounds like a no to you. Tim raised his eyebrows at him, and Craig shrugged and laughed in apology. But that's none of my business. Perhaps you are right. I'm a little cautious. I just got out of a long-term relationship with my college girlfriend, and it's been a while since I've actually tried to impress someone, especially someone who spends a lot of time with his mom. They laughed. The worst thing that can happen is rejection, and we've all been there. But I understand. You're a thoughtful guy for a young one. This time I shrugged my shoulders, and soon we were back to filming. A couple of hours at Jordan Pond was all that was planned before meeting at 7 p.m. to head to the top of Cadillac Mountain for sunset photography. We returned to the hotel and went about our business. I decided to cool off in the pool, so I went back to my room, rinsed off in the shower, and changed into my swim trunks. With a towel, glasses, room key, and laptop, I went there. After a quick dip, I settled into a lounge chair to soak up the sun for a while and look through photos from a recent graduation shoot. The pool was fairly quiet as Ken and Yvette sat at the far end, and another couple in their 30s or 40s, not from our group, swam together. I had just opened my laptop and launched Lightroom to edit when I heard familiar voices. I turned to see Pam and then Jessica appearing behind her. I tried not to react when I saw her in a blue and white checkered bikini. It wasn't too revealing, but it definitely wasn't modest. I mentally thanked the universe for the sunglasses as my eyes roamed over her full breasts and smooth tan skin. Mind if we join? Jessica asked, tossing her towel and her book onto the lounge chair and then sliding her white shorts down her legs. I managed to say, I don't mind at all, in a relatively normal voice as I assessed her legs and ass up close, trying not to sound like a pervert. She lay down on the chaise longue, pulling it apart to lie down. Pam was already in the pool. Aren't you going to go swimming? I asked. Maybe later, she answered. I'm quite content just lying here. Swimming requires energy. Yes, there was a lot to do today, especially with the early rise. Did you both like it? It was wonderful. Kelly taught us a lot too. We began to discuss photography in more detail about what we were doing that day. At some point, Hank appeared. I didn't notice him, but I heard him laugh, and Jessica and I looked over and saw him in the pool, chatting with Pam. Finally, Jessica asked about my work. To be honest, not that much, mostly for extra income. Family portraits, graduation photography, that sort of thing. It makes some money, and it's quite fun. I also do street photography for more artistic expression. How did you get interested in this? She asked, turning her body towards me and resting her head on her hand. Without moving my head, I let my eyes roam over her perfect body. Images of her without a swimsuit, under me, on me, around me flashed through my head in a split second, and I had to physically move so as not to get aroused right in front of her. In reality, the pause was not long, and I managed to compose myself to answer. My father was always interested in photography and taught me a lot as a child. I didn't do this in high school, but my girlfriend in college dragged me into a photography course. It's ironic, but the hobby remained with me, not her. How long were you together? Jessica asked casually. Almost 6 years. We broke up a few months ago. Oh, I'm sorry, she answered with a slight pity in her voice. Nothing, really. We just went our separate ways. It happens, especially when you meet at 19. And there's that smile again. Finally, I realized what was so attractive about her, besides her full lips. It was a smile that hinted that she knew more than she was saying. An aura of mystery. Has anything happened since then? No, I'm free. I didn't necessarily mean a relationship. Affairs are also good for the soul. I don't have much experience with this. I think I went from high school girl to college girl without a break. You're cute and clearly not a serial killer. It's unlikely you'd have any problems. There is always time for new experiments," she said, looking straight at me. I felt a familiar warmth when she said this, and again I had to cool down mentally. "What about you? Have you recently had a relationship, fling, or experimentation?" I asked, perhaps too casually. For a long time, there was no serious relationship. There was a guy I dated a little, but it was more informal. I didn't insist any further. The conversation continued, but the topic changed slightly. She was saving money for travel, so we talked about places we would like to visit. We both wanted to visit Alaska and South America. She wanted to see Egypt. The conversation was almost enough to distract me from thinking about her body. "Are these your photos?" She suddenly changed the topic, looking at my laptop. "Oh yes, these are just graduation photos for a local family. I made them a couple of weeks ago, but the deadline is coming." "Can I see some of your other work? Not the clients, but our own." I opened my photo stream and selected one of my favorite episodes, the Utica parade that I took my camera to during my 3rd year. She came over and sat down next to me on the lounge chair, so I moved over a little. She sat next to me, our thighs touching as I scrolled. I told short stories to some of them, she commented on others, and still others we simply silently evaluated. I didn't think much about what would happen after these pictures in the stream until I pressed the next button, and a black and white photograph appeared in front of us, half in shadow of the torso and waist of a naked woman. "Wow," said Jessica. I shuddered and began to close the laptop. "These are pictures from a class I took that year, just a model we worked with. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Can I have a look? Or is it weird?" I prayed for my own composure. Sitting next to her was hard enough considering how anxious I was, and now we were going to look at nude photos together. "Sure, if you're interested. They're pretty ordinary." I started scrolling. There were close-ups, several shots of her full, naked body. My favorite was with the model sitting backwards, light and shadow alternately covering the curves of her back and ass as she looked over her shoulder. Jessica stopped me on this photo, noting how much she liked it. "They are really good, and the models are beautiful. Was it weird to take them off?" "Oh yes. There were 8 of us in the studio, and it felt quite awkward." "Are these the only nude photos you've ever taken?" "Yes, it was fine, but I didn't have a strong desire to do it again." "Nude photos of your ex ever?" I laughed. "No, Amy definitely wouldn't let me do that." "Is it true? If I were dating a photographer, I would happily agree, especially if he could make me so beautiful." "I don't think it will take much effort for you to look beautiful." It just came out, but I stood my ground. The smile appeared again. "Is it true? Do you think I look good without clothes?" She turned and leaned over, her left breast almost touching my bicep. "That's my hypothesis, yes." "Hmm. Hypotheses require testing, if I remember school science correctly." I was on the verge of inviting her to my room to check on some things when Pam walked up. "Ready for dinner? Or am I in the way?" she said, and I greeted her. Of course, Aaron was just showing me pictures of himself. I prayed that Pam wouldn't ask to see that full frontal shot that was still on my laptop screen. She didn't ask. Jessica turned to me. "We have plans for dinner. Are you going for a sunset walk?" I confirmed. "See you there." And they left. I stared into space for a minute or two, processing the rapid change in situation, then sighed and continued looking through the photos before heading out to grab a bite to eat. The sunset was waiting. The sunset from the top of Cadillac Mountain that evening was gorgeous, with a few low clouds that glowed red and purple against an orange background. Everyone gathered and Kelly explained a little history of the place before letting us walk along the rocky trails at the top. I left my tripod and took only the wide-angle and 50 mm lenses, no zoom, but with perfect quality and color rendition. I had gotten really excited about experimenting with the wide-angle lens earlier that day and became completely immersed in the process as the reds and oranges illuminated the mountain. Once I was happy with the results, I switched to a prime lens to catch the evening hues on the landscape, details grass, rocks, etc. I turned the corner and saw Jessica, alone, just watching the ocean as the magical colors began to fade. She was wearing jeans and a light sweater over a white shirt with the top two buttons undone. It was a good image. Her bag with the camera lay at her feet. "Aren't you filming now?" I asked, and she looked over her shoulder with a smile. "No, I took a few pictures, but I wanted to make sure that I was enjoying this spectacle with my eyes and not through the camera." She looked out at the ocean again, the warm light playing on her face as the breeze gently ruffled her hair. Without thinking, I raised the camera and began to take a portrait of her shoulders and head in soft light. She looked at me in surprise. "I should have asked first, but you looked." I hesitated for a split second. "You look beautiful in this light," and I couldn't resist. I couldn't quite understand the expression on her face when I said it, but she ran her fingers through the hair behind her ear. "Thank you," she said, and smiled again with the same mysterious smile. "Can I have another one too?" I asked. She agreed and looked straight at me as I pressed the shutter. I caught that smile, exactly the way I wanted. I stopped, but she looked down at my camera. "You can take more pictures if you want. It's not exactly a test of your hypothesis, but it's not bad." The light was beginning to dim, but it was soft, giving her skin a gentle glow. "Are you sure?" I asked, continuing to film. "You don't even know how much I charge for work." She laughed. Click. "I model for you, maybe I should charge you." Her hand slid along her neck. Click. "I'm sure we can find some kind of mutually beneficial agreement." She undid the third button and bent over slightly, revealing a magnificent view of her upper breasts, hidden by the lace bra that barely peeked out from under her shirt. Click, click, click. She was about to respond when Kelly called from the top of the hill. The light had indeed faded, and the bus was about to depart. We finished filming and laughed, maybe a little awkwardly, but nicely. I felt ready to put thoughts of Amy aside, so as we walked up the path, I suggested, "Will you have a drink with me at the hotel bar?" But when I asked, she made eye contact with Pam, who was walking with Hank. Pam waved her hand. "Sorry, I would love to, honestly, but it's not the best time on this trip. I already promised her that we would watch a movie together tonight. But give me your number so I can send you my email address, send me photos. If they turn out well, I'd like to have them." Slightly disappointed, I dictated my number. Within a minute, I had it, as well as my email address. "I'll look at them tonight and send them if everything works out." "Thank you. I hope you like them too." She smiled again and walked towards Pam. Entering the room, I took a long, hot shower, thinking about her. After drying off and not putting on clothes, I inserted the memory card into the laptop. All the photos for the day started to load, but I went straight to the last shots and found the ones I already liked. Jessica smiling, the light on her skin, her breasts, a moment of promise frozen in time. I imagined another way for this moment to unfold and relieve the tension while she watched from the screen. Sunday. I decided to skip the morning sunrise photography and sleep longer instead. Waking up around 8, I began to process the pictures from yesterday. Selected some nice shots from Ocean Drive and Jordan Pond. I felt like I was getting better at working with a wide-angle lens and got some really nice photos from the lake. But when it came to the sunset shots at the top of Cadillac Mountain, I was again amazed at how well my photo shoot with Jessica went. Even in low light, and I admit, with shaky hands, they were clear and on time. I felt excited again, imagining what could have been, and released the tension again before emailing Jessica with the photos and the message, "You can be my model anytime." The next time I saw her was during an easy hike across a sandbank that was only accessible for a couple of hours at low tide. The morning fog was still shrouding the place when we arrived around 10, and it made for some nice shots of the sailboats moored and the mist floating around them. I caught up with Jessica after trying to take over the stage. "Have you seen my letter?" I asked. She leaned towards me conspiratorially. "Yes, when I was waiting for the bus, Lisa noticed one of the pictures towards the end, and asked me some leading questions. "What did you tell her?" "I was just helping a friend get a good shot." I laughed awkwardly at this, slightly irritated by her constant fluctuations between obvious flirtation and understandable refusal. She must have noticed something on my face because she immediately apologized. "I really like you and you're cute, and under any other circumstances this trip would probably have gone very differently, so forgive me if I seem hesitant. I just try to remind myself that no matter how much I want to get to know you better, she is my mom and she needs me." She glanced at Pam, who was listening to another of Hank's stories. "I completely understand that. Do what you have to do, but I can keep trying." "I hope so." She ran her hand over my forearm and walked further towards her mother, looking back at me. I sighed and took a photo of the seagulls. The bird let out a loud cry. "Fuck you," I replied. Jessica and Pam didn't go for a short hike on the Jessup Trail that day, so I talked to Sue and Gary. They were serious bird watchers, and although I was impressed, I became bored. But I took some good pictures of the sparrows. The sunset photo shoot was planned to take place in Base Harbor, where the lighthouse that created the iconic photo was located. But Craig and Tim knew a small Japanese restaurant nearby and invited me to have dinner with them. I agreed, partly because I love sushi, partly because a cloudless sky was unlikely to provide a spectacular sunset, and partly because it was an opportunity to avoid another emotional swing, conscious or not. The decision turned out to be correct. They were excellent dinner companions. However, I really wanted to participate in the evening's activity, astrophotography. The previous night had been a great sunset, with partial cloud cover low and high. But the same conditions, even during the new moon, made it difficult to get clear images of the Milky Way. Today's clear skies were ideal for this, and Acadia was one of the few places in the Northeast where this was possible. Light pollution was remarkably low here. Few people gathered for this event. Craig and Tim came with us, mainly because they knew the photographer Kelly brought along to give us some tips. Lisa said she never misses an opportunity to dive into space. Ken and Yvette also joined, and Jessica, one Jessica. I was a little surprised to see her there when I arrived at the parking lot. Astrophotography practically requires a tripod, and she didn't have one. But she said she came more for stargazing than photography. She was wearing shorts and an Acadia sweatshirt that looked new. "My mom went to bed early," she said, "so I don't feel guilty. Plus, it'll be nice to have some time without her. It's been a little stressful." "Is she having a hard time now?" I asked. "Sort of. It's hard to say," she answered. "The first night we talked a lot, and she was quite depressed. She's been looking a little better the last couple of days, mostly, but, well, I don't know about you and your parents, but after a few days I usually start wanting some time to myself." "That I completely understand." I laughed. The ride took about 20 minutes until the twilight finally disappeared. Kelly explained that to get a clearer shot, it was best to wait until at least an hour after sunset, which meant that when we finally unloaded at the small parking lot, it was about 9:45 p.m. The sky was incredible. I've never been out west or far enough from major cities to see the full impact of dark skies, but it was spectacular. It was clear that Jessica was also impressed as we stood there with our hands touching each other and enjoying the view. Our guest photographer, Ted, took us to the beach and explained the basic settings, types of shots, etc. This required long exposures, a few seconds for the sky, but up to 5 to 10 minutes for a good shot of the land with the sea blurred, which could then be combined with the sky to create a truly dramatic image. This was exactly what I wanted to try. I listened intently as Ted explained his strategies. Craig added a few thoughts of his own. We scattered along the beach so as not to get into each other's shots. Jessica stayed by my side while I set up the tripod and set up the shot, and we chatted easily about it all. For the first few minutes, I focused on getting the sky exposed correctly. I immediately liked it. The light of the sky was transmitted well to the small screen of my camera. I took several pictures with different settings while Jessica watched. The ground shot was more difficult. In such low light, it would take time to get it right. I started with 5 minutes and pressed the shutter button. Jessica was sitting on a large rock behind us, and I walked over to sit next to her. We were silent for a minute or two, then, as if telepathically, we decided that my arm would go around her shoulders and her head would rest on my shoulder. It's so beautiful. It's hard to believe that this is all hidden under our sky every night, and we don't see it. Add poet to your list of skills. I made fun of her. She nudged me playfully. Don't you think it's beautiful? She looked at me. It really was beautiful, and so was she, and without thinking, I kissed her, and she kissed me back. We looked away from each other for a second to make sure it was normal. That was it, and we started again, this time more seriously. I ran my fingers through her hair and felt her hand on my chest. At that moment, I heard the shutter click and turned my photo was ready. She laughed. Keep checking on him. I'll still be here. She kissed me on the cheek. She remained sitting while I checked what I had done. It was a start, but too dark, more time is needed. I set the timer for 8 minutes and started filming again, then went back to it. I set the timer for longer this time. I told her, returning to her lips. Good strategy. She whispered, pressing her body to mine. I ran my hand through her hair again, this time continuing down to her face and down to the soft skin of her neck, then down her back. Her hands slid over my chest, neck, through my beard. I heard her moan softly as I ran my hand up her back and started kissing her neck. But just as she approached me, someone laughed, not too far away, and we interrupted each other to look around. Craig approached Ted and Kelly from behind, and although he didn't look like he saw us, he might have. I think we got lost for a minute, I said, a little out of breath. Yeah, I would say that. I was very close to taking my clothes off. I wouldn't mind a couple more minutes in this state. I hope you last longer. She touched my arm again. I laughed and kissed her lightly. Come to my room later and check for yourself. I put my hand on her thigh and she kissed me back. My camera clicked again. The second shot was better than the first. I was going to increase the take up to 10 minutes, and luckily after I had calmed down a bit, Kelly and Ted came over and the four of us talked for a bit while my image was being processed. They gave us 15 minutes to prepare for the bus to depart. When my camera finally clicked, I checked the picture and it looked exactly as I had imagined. Normally, I'd be looking forward to getting back to my room and playing with the settings, but this time I had more ambitious plans for the evening. I was finally going to break my abstinence. Jessica and I sat together on the way back, holding hands but holding back the urge to take each other's clothes off since Ken and Yvette were sitting right in front of us. We quickly said goodbye and headed to the hotel together. When we got to the elevator, she said she would go to her room to get a couple of things. I gave her my room number. We kissed in the elevator, but she got off on her floor, and I went to my room and waited. I waited, and I waited. 20 minutes later, I received a message. I'm really, really sorry, but my mom is awake, and she really needs to talk to me, so I think I should stay here. I really want to be with you. I'm sorry. I threw the phone on the bed, and a moment later, with a painful groan, I collapsed onto it after her. Monday. The rain started overnight and was expected to continue throughout the day, heavy in places. This almost killed plans for the day, a visit to Eagle Lake. I came down for breakfast, and Tim waved at me to join their table. We talked a little about the weather and the possibility that it would improve before sunset. We get some great sunsets here after these storms, Craig added. Then there was a pause. I didn't expect to see you alone this morning, he said, and Tim looked at him reproachfully. I probably did too, but then I realized what he was talking about. You saw us on the beach, I said, more as an affirmation than a question. He laughed. Just for a second, I didn't mean to get involved. Tim muttered a quiet, of course he was going to, and they both laughed. Yeah, well, she had to go back to her mom, so... I shrugged, trying to hide my annoyance. We changed the subject, mainly because Tim was staring at his partner and enjoyed the rest of breakfast. With my trip to Eagle Lake canceled, I decided to take a drive to unwind. traveled aimlessly along the roads around Acadia, and ate lunch at a small diner in Tremont before returning. I went to the hotel gym for a while and then went back to my room and took a shower. I dried off and put on just my gym shorts, then opened my laptop. I'd been working on the night shots for a while and was starting to figure out how to put them together. But my thoughts kept coming back to her, the feel of her under my hands, her lips on my body. I tried to resist, but in the end, I reopened those photos from the sunset 2 days ago. Plans for some nice solo time in the early afternoon began to take shape when there was a knock on the door. I frowned and stood up to see who was there. I saw Jessica through the peephole. I opened the door, and she looked at my bare chest. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. "Can I come in?" I nodded, and she entered. She was wearing a green dress with spaghetti straps and an apologetic expression on her face. "I'm really, really sorry about last night. I didn't want to get your hopes up. Until I walked into my room, I was fully determined to come here and rip your clothes off." "Everything is fine." I internally grumbled about this topic, but everything is fine. "What happened? Is your mom okay?" She made a strange expression on her face. "So, the most surprising thing is, everything is actually fine with her. That's why I'm here." "What do you mean?" "Well, remember how Hank has been constantly talking to her for the past few days?" she asked. "Yes," I drawled, and suddenly I understood what she was talking about. "Wait, seriously?" I laughed. "Oh yes, we had a big emotional conversation last night about whether she's ready to move on and how she's really attracted to Hank, and they're spending time together, and I really, really don't want to think about it, so I was hoping that you can." She came very close to me to help me take my mind off things. She looked at me, then pressed herself close to me and kissed me. I kissed back. She pulled away and took my hands, pulling me towards the bed, but then noticed her photo on my laptop. I blushed with embarrassment. "It looks even better on this screen," she said, and then gave me a sly smile. "Did I interrupt you?" I would say pleasantly changed plans. She lay down on the pillow next to her laptop and began scrolling through other photos from that night. I sat on the other side. A playful smile appeared on her face. "Would you like to take some more photos of me?" She closed my laptop and ran a finger along her cleavage along the hem of her dress. My heart beat faster, and I grabbed the camera that was lying on the chair. I quickly changed the lens to 50 mm and turned to her. She was lying on the pillow, her eyes looking straight at me, illuminated by the soft light penetrating the clouds outside. I took a photo, then another, close-up of her face, capturing every detail. Then I stepped back to get her all in the frame. "Tell me what you want me to do," she said, almost in a whisper. "Run your hand through your hair." She sat up, still looking straight at me, and ran her fingers through her hair. "Bite your bottom lip," I ordered. She did this while looking as seductive as I could have imagined. Click, click. I touched her and pulled one strap off her shoulder, touching her skin. Click, click. "Get down." She slid down, and I stood on the bed above her, taking her off from above. Click, click. "Go to the window and look outside." The hotel had large bay windows overlooking the water. She did as I said. The light on it was almost perfect. "Pull down your dress, but don't turn to me." She looked over her shoulder at me, her lips parted slightly, and she slowly slid the other strap off her shoulder, letting the dress fall to the floor. I hung the camera on the strap for a minute and touched her bare shoulders, turning her slightly without exposing her chest, letting the tension build. There the light was exactly the way I wanted. She continued to look at me, with obvious desire on her face. Click, click, click. And then, without waiting for my order, she turned to face me. I saw her completely. She was more beautiful than I could have imagined. And then she reached over and took the camera off my shoulder, placing it on the table. I gave her time to enjoy the wait, but now everything exploded when I kissed her, pressing her body to mine, feeling her warm skin pressed against me. "I want you right here," I whispered in her ear. "Take your time." Then she gave me pleasure. "I'm going to go take a shower. When you can move again, join me." I laughed lightly and turned my head, watching as she walked into the bathroom. I heard the water in the shower rustle as my breathing began to calm down, and by the time I could feel my heart no longer beating like crazy, she was already standing under the stream of water. I gathered the strength to stand up and went to join her. Then we came out with a bath and made love. I fell asleep hugging her like that. When I woke up, she was still sleeping. I captured it from every angle, exploring light, shadow, and beauty. When she finally woke up, I had already downloaded the photos along with the ones I had taken earlier onto my laptop. "Show me," she said lazily, turning over. I've already started processing them and switched a couple to black and white. My favorite was by the window, her naked back to me as she looked at me hungrily over her shoulder, a better version of that shot she had seen earlier of the model. In black and white, it was an artistic shot, soft light and deep shadows merging in perfect harmony, the sexiest shot I've ever taken. "This is great," she said, approaching. "These pictures are amazing. Can I have them?" she asked. "Of course," I replied, putting my laptop aside and leaning in for a kiss as she caressed me. Her phone rang in her shorts, which were lying on the floor, and she stopped to check who was calling. "Is this your mother?" I asked. "Yes." She looked up. "She writes that she and Hank are having a good time, and that I shouldn't worry, and that I can have dinner myself." Her eyebrows rose. "Ugh. Well, that's kind of nice. You and your mom had sex at the same time." I pretended not to see her outrage as she threw a pillow at me. "I was just starting to think I liked you." She threw a pillow at my face. "And I like you," I said, pulling her towards me. "Yes, I like you," she said, and we kissed again. After the third round, we decided to go for dinner. We ended up in a small American bistro by the water when the rain stopped. Craig was right. The sunset was amazing, and we watched it together, without cameras. After dinner, we returned to the hotel, holding hands, talking easily, as happens after the first intimacy. Her mom texted that she was going back to her room for the night, and Jessica decided to go see her. I said it was okay because I wasn't sure if I was capable of more after what she did to me earlier. I went back to my room, sent her pictures, and slept better than I had in months. Tuesday. I woke up around 8 in the morning to a text from Jessica. "Just got out of the shower and Mom just left for breakfast with Hank. Want to come over to my place?" I answered quickly, "Don't wear any clothes, I'll be there soon." "You read my mind." She sent a photo in response. "Don't keep yourself waiting or I'll start without you," came the next message as I brushed my teeth. I was at her door in 5 minutes. She opened it completely naked, and my mouth dropped open in surprise as she pulled me into the room. I noticed her laptop on the table, with a black and white photo of her by the window open on the screen. "I saw your letter when I returned from a run and looked at them as soon as Mom left. Just seeing them again turned me on, especially the ones where I'm sitting on my knees." "Yeah, I like them too." What are you going to do about it?" She stepped back, allowing me to take a full look at her. I started to undress when she took her camera. "You took your pictures, now it's my turn." She took a couple of pictures, then I walked up to her and she put the camera on the table. "I wanted to make sure we did it one more time before we left this afternoon," she said as she pulled my clothes off and laid me on the bed. "I'm glad you wrote to me," I agreed. We were scheduled to go on another event today, a boat trip that promised the chance to see seals and maybe even puffins in one of the few places they could be seen in the US. Then came the departure. "So it looks like I've had my first affair." I finished getting dressed as she put on her bra. She slowed down for a split second upon hearing this, but then finished putting on her clothes. "How do you like it?" she asked as I buttoned my shirt. "Amazing. I missed a lot." "Well, a lot depends on your partner." I have no doubt about it. She was already dressed, so I got out of bed. She came over to me and kissed me again, deeper this time. "You know," she began. I guessed her thoughts and interrupted. "It's a 3.5-hour drive," I said before she could finish. She stopped. "What?" she asked. "Distance between Worcester and Utica. You know, in case you want to make this into something more than just a romance." She leaned towards me, smiled again, and kissed me tenderly. "You read my mind," she said. "Am I guessing right?" "You guessed right." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.